I had always considered myself a rational person, the kind of individual who needed evidence before accepting the inexplicable. My life revolved around routine and logic, a steady rhythm of work and leisure in equal measure. The office, located in a steel and glass marble of modern architecture, was where I spent most of my days. It housed rows of identical cubicles under cold fluorescent lights, the perfect backdrop for someone who thrived on mundane consistency. Each morning, I arrived promptly at 8, my footsteps echoing on the polished marble floors. The elevator ride to the 10th floor was a ritual in itself. The familiar whir of machinery, a comforting lullaby. My cubicle was a reflection of my personality, neat, organized, with everything in its rightful place. The days were predictable, filled with the usual hum of keyboards and the occasional ring of a phone. There was a tranquility to the monotony, a sense of security that I cherished deeply. However, my sense of normalcy began to unravel the day I discovered the distress corner. It was a term whispered among colleagues with a mixture of jest and unease, a corner of the office that seemed to cloak itself in shadow regardless of the hour. I stumbled upon it purely by accident during one of those rare moments when I broke from my routine. A forgotten file had sent me on a detour through parts of the building I seldom frequented. The distress corner was an unremarkable alcove situated at the far end of the corridor, flanked by two large potted plants that seemed to wilt regardless of the amount of water they received. The air felt different there, heavier somehow, as if imbued with a palpable tension that made my skin prickle. It wasn't just the dim lighting or the slightly colder temperature. It was something intangible, a presence that made my heart quicken. I hesitated there, caught between curiosity and a growing sense of unease. It was then that I noticed the odd pattern of footsteps on the carpet, a path worn into the fibers as though countless individuals had stood in that very spot, shifting nervously from foot to foot. The sensation was fleeting but profound, leaving me with an inexplicable urge to retreat back to the safety of my cubicle. Days passed, and I found myself unable to shake the memory of that corner. It lingered in my mind like a stubborn echo, a question that refused to be silenced. I mentioned it casually to a colleague, hoping to dispel the growing sense of foreboding. Her reaction was immediate, a brief flash of discomfort followed by a forced laugh. "Ah, the distress corner," she said, her voice light, but her eyes troubled. "It's just one of those office myths. Supposedly, people who stand there get a bit jittery. It's all in their heads, of course. Except it wasn't just in my head. The more I tried to dismiss it, the more it seemed to draw me in. I found myself making excuses to pass by, each time feeling the same oppressive weight settle over me. It was as though the corner was alive, whispering secrets just out of earshot, a place where thoughts twisted and turned until they were unrecognizable. I began to notice changes in myself, subtle at first, but growing more pronounced with each encounter. My sleep became restless, plagued by dreams that slipped through my fingers upon waking. The office, once a haven of predictability, started to feel like a labyrinth with hidden depths. There was something insidious about the way the distress corner occupied my thoughts, an enigma that taunted me with its elusiveness. Weeks turned into a monotonous blur, my fascination with the corner bordering on obsession. I spent more time in its vicinity, under the guise of work-related errands. Each visit left me feeling drained yet oddly exhilarated, as if the boundaries of reality were shifting, bending to an invisible force. The escalation came unexpectedly, a slow burn that reached its boiling point on a particularly dreary afternoon. I had been compiling reports, the endless stream of data a welcome distraction from the growing turmoil within, but the numbers danced across the screen, refusing to coalesce into meaning. Frustration mounted, fueling the urge to step away, to seek solace in the familiar unease of the distress corner. The corridor was empty, the office hushed as though holding its breath. I stood there, enveloped in shadow, the familiar weight settling over me like an unwelcome embrace. My mind raced, a chaotic jumble of thoughts and impressions that refused to settle. And then, for the first time, I heard it, a soft, insistent whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Why do you linger here?" it asked, the words threading through my consciousness like a melody. What do you seek? I spun around, my heart pounding with a fear that was both thrilling and terrifying. There was no one there, yet the presence was undeniable. It was as if the corner itself had become sentient, its question echoing within the confines of my mind. What do you seek? The voice repeated, softer now, almost a caress. It was a question I couldn't answer, a query that resonated with hidden truths I couldn't grasp. I fled then, retreating to the safety of my desk, the familiar sound of typing a fragile tether to reality. But the voice lingered, a spectral companion that shadowed my every thought. The climax came that night, in the solitude of my apartment, where shadows stretched long and sinister. I tried to distract myself with television, the flickering images a hollow comfort. But the whisper persisted, weaving through the fabric of my mind with a persistence that was impossible to ignore. Why do you linger here? It asked again, a refrain that summoned the darkest corners of my soul. What do you seek? I found myself standing at the window, gazing out at the city below, its lights twinkling like distant stars. The question hung in the air, pregnant with meaning and possibility. What did I seek? The answer eluded me, slipping through my grasp like sand through fingers. In that moment, I understood the true nature of the distress corner. It was a catalyst, a mirror that reflected my innermost fears and desires, a place where the boundaries between reality and imagination blurred. It wasn't haunted in the traditional sense, but it held a power all its own, a power that could unearth the buried truths within us. The fear lingered, a constant companion that danced on the edges of my consciousness. I returned to the office the next day, attempting to resume my routine, but the corner's presence was inescapable, a silent siren call that beckoned with promises of answers and revelations. I never stood in the distressed corner again, but its memory haunted me, a testament to the mysteries that lie within and beyond our understanding. The office became a place of watchful silence, a space where shadows held secrets and whispers carried truths. And though I carried on, I couldn't escape the feeling that something had changed within me, a subtle shift in the fabric of my existence. The distressed corner had shown me the fragility of normalcy, the delicate balance between order and chaos. It was a reminder that even in the most mundane of places, the extraordinary could take root, waiting for the curious and the brave to uncover its secrets. And so, life continued, a tapestry of routine and intrigue, forever marked by the enigma of the distressed corner, a shadow that would never truly fade. In the heart of the city, surrounded by towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, I worked in an office building that seemed to reach endlessly into the sky. It was a standard affair, with its rows of cubicles, the hum of computers, and the ever familiar smell of stale coffee lingering in the air. My days blended together in a monotony that was oddly comforting. Every morning, I arrived just as the sun began to peek through the horizon, casting a golden glow over the steel and glass. I would settle into my desk, a small space compartmentalized by beige partitions, and begin the day's work. The office had its quirks, as most places do. There were the usual office politics, the occasional celebratory cake for a birthday, and the water cooler gossip that provided a brief respite from the pressing deadlines. Yet, there was one particular peculiarity that stood out amongst the others, a small nook on the third floor that everyone referred to as the distress corner. It was tucked away at the end of a long corridor, a space that seemed almost an afterthought in the building's design. No one knew why it was called that or who started the name. Some said it was because it was where people went to cry when the stress became too much, while others whispered that it was a spot where strange things occurred. For the longest time, I paid it no heed. It was just another piece of office folklore, the sort of thing that added a dash of color to our otherwise gray days. But there was something about the way people avoided it, the way they lowered their voices when passing by, that piqued my curiosity. I began to notice little things, how people would glance towards it with a furtive nervousness, quickly averting their eyes, as if afraid to meet its gaze. Despite my curiosity, I avoided the corner. There was no reason to venture there, no logical need that would draw me in. Yet, its presence lingered in the back of my mind, a silent marker in the topography of my day. Until the morning, everything began to change. It started innocuously enough. I had stayed late the previous night, finishing a report that had kept me in the office long after the others had left. As the last streaks of daylight faded, I packed my things and headed home, eager for the solace of my apartment. On my way out, I passed the distress corner. It was empty, as expected, but something caught my attention, a small, folded piece of paper tucked neatly into the corner of the baseboard. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, unfolding it carefully, a part of me expecting some kind of prank or a forgotten note. Instead, it was a message scrawled hastily in blue ink. Help, I'm stuck. The words were simple, yet they sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced around, half expecting someone to jump out and reveal the joke, but the corridor was silent. I pocketed the note and hurried home, my mind racing with possibilities. The note could have been written by anyone, at any time, but the immediacy of the message, its desperate plea, lingered with me throughout the night. The next day, I found myself drawn back to the distress corner. I told myself it was just to satisfy my curiosity, to see if there were any more notes. As I approached, the air felt different, charged somehow, as if the very molecules were vibrating with anticipation. There was another note, this one pinned under a small rock. It read, I can't get out. The logical part of my brain dismissed the notes as pranks, the work of some bored coworker, perhaps. Yet, there was a part of me, deep and instinctual, that couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this. That night, as I sat in my apartment, my thoughts kept drifting back to the notes, to the sense of unease that had settled over me like a second skin. I began to dream about the distress corner. In my dreams, it was a place of shadows, a space that seemed to warp and twist, its corners infinite and unfathomable. I would wake in a cold sweat, the echo of whispered voices fading into the silence of my room. Each morning, I returned to the office, drawn to the corner by a force I couldn't quite understand. More notes appeared, each one more desperate than the last. They spoke of being trapped, of fear and confusion, of a place that was both familiar and alien. As the days passed, I became increasingly preoccupied, my thoughts consumed by the strange messages. My work suffered, my interactions with colleagues became stilted, as if I were observing them from a great distance. The office, once a place of routine and normalcy, began to shift in my perception. Shadows seemed darker, corners sharper, and the distressed corner loomed large in my mind, its presence a constant weight. I began to spend more time there, lingering after hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever truth lay hidden. I felt watched, as if the corner itself were a sentient thing, observing me with a patient, unsettling gaze. My sleep was fitful, my dreams increasingly vivid, filled with labyrinthine corridors and endless doors, each promising escape yet leading back to the start. It was during one of these dreams, or perhaps it was a vision, that I saw her, an indistinct figure, her outline blurred, standing in the corner. Her eyes, wide and pleading, met mine, and I understood with a clarity that pierced through the haze of sleep. She was the one trapped, and somehow, impossibly, the distress corner was the key. Driven by this revelation, I began to research the building, searching for any records or mentions of disappearances, of strange occurrences. I found little, save for a few vague reports of strange noises, of shadows moving independently of light. The building's history was unremarkable, yet the absence of information only deepened my conviction that something was amiss. I became a fixture in the office, even on weekends, my obsession with the corner consuming every waking moment. My colleagues noticed my distraction, some expressing concern, others avoiding me altogether. I tried to explain, to share the burden of my knowledge, but their skepticism was palpable, their dismissals a cold reminder of my isolation. The climax came one stormy night, when the wind howled like a banshee outside the office windows. I was alone, save for the glow of my computer screen and the steady hum of the air conditioning. The building was eerily silent, the usual clatter of keyboards and phones replaced by the rhythmic patter of rain against the glass. I felt compelled to visit the corner, as if drawn by an invisible thread. The air was thick, oppressive, and as I turned the corner, I saw her again, the figure from my dreams, standing in the shadows. Her eyes, pools of despair, locked onto mine. She didn't speak, yet her presence conveyed a message clearer than words. She was real, and she was trapped in a way I couldn't comprehend. I reached out, my hand trembling, and in that instant, the world shifted. The walls seemed to pulse, the floor beneath me quivering like a living thing. My vision blurred, and for a heartbeat, I glimpsed another world, its geometry impossible, its reality a mockery of everything I knew. And then, just as abruptly, it was gone, leaving me gasping on my knees, alone in the dim light of the office. I left that night, shaken to my core, my mind a whirl of confusion and fear. I didn't understand what had happened, what I had seen. The rationality that I clung to felt fragile, a thin veneer over a chasm of chaos. I avoided the distress corner after that, yet its presence lingered, a specter on the edge of my consciousness. Life continued, the weeks bleeding into months, and outwardly, I resumed a semblance of normalcy. Yet, the experience had changed something fundamental within me. I moved through my days with a heightened awareness, an acute sensitivity to the spaces around me. The world felt subtly altered, as if the facade of reality had cracked, revealing something vast and unknowable beneath. In the quiet moments, when the distractions of work and life faded, I felt her presence, a soft whisper at the edge of hearing. I never discovered the truth of the distress corner, whether it was a portal, a fracture in reality, or something else entirely. It remained an enigma, a mystery unresolved, yet its impact was undeniable. I still dream of it sometimes, of the figure standing silent and watchful, her eyes holding secrets I may never comprehend. I wake with a start, my heart pounding, and for a moment, I expect to find myself back in that shadowy corner. But I am in my apartment, the morning light filtering through the curtains, grounding me in the familiar. The fear lingers, a companion as constant as my own shadow, reminding me of the thin line between the known and the unknown, the safe and the terrifying. I live my life, but the distress corner remains, an indelible part of my story, a testament to the mysteries that lie hidden in the corners of our reality. The office building stood in the heart of the city, an unassuming monolith of glass and steel, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of constant human activity. I worked on the 12th floor, amidst a sea of identical cubicles, where the click-clack of keyboards and the hum of fluorescent lights created a soothing, predictable rhythm. It was a place that spoke of normalcy, a place that felt so ordinary that one could almost forget the passing of time. I was a project manager at one of the many tech firms nestled within the building, a job that demanded precision and deadlines, but offered little in excitement or surprise. My desk was perpetually cluttered with documents, a testament to my daily battles with bureaucracy. The office, with its neutral tone furnishings and ubiquitous motivational posters, was a place that lulled the senses. Yet it was here, in this mundane setting, that everything changed. The disturbance began on an overcast Thursday afternoon. The sky outside was a uniform sheet of gray, a mirror to the monotony of our tasks. I was returning from a meeting when I noticed it for the first time, a small, nondescript corner near the break room, partially obscured by a large potted plant. It might have been there all along, unnoticed, but something about it now caught my attention. It was just a corner, a 90-degree angle formed by two walls, nothing more. Yet, as I passed by, a strange sensation washed over me, a fleeting sense of unease. Shrugging it off as a momentary lapse, a trick of the mind, I continued with my day. However, the following day, as I passed the corner again, the feeling intensified. It was as though the air around it was charged with a subtle, invisible energy. I found myself pausing, drawn inexplicably towards it. There was nothing there, no shadow, no unusual marking, nothing but the sterile white walls. And yet, the sensation lingered, a quiet whisper in my mind urging me to step closer. I dismissed it once more, attributing it to stress or fatigue. Work was demanding, after all, and I often found myself lost in my thoughts, zoning out during particularly mundane tasks. But over the next week, The corner became an obsession. I grew increasingly aware of its presence, and each time I passed it, the compulsion to stop and stand there grew stronger. It was as if the corner had become a focal point, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. Then, one evening, as I lingered late at the office, the compulsion became irresistible. The building was almost empty, the usual chatter and clatter replaced by oppressive silence. I found myself standing before the corner, my heart pounding with an inexplicable anticipation. Tentatively, I stepped into the space, feeling a curious mix of dread and excitement. In that moment, the corner felt like an entirely different place. The air was cool against my skin, and for the briefest second, I swore I could hear a faint, distant sound, a low hum, barely perceptible, akin to a deep, resonant voice murmuring just beyond my reach. I leaned in, straining to catch a fragment of its message, but it faded into the silence, leaving only the echo of its presence. From that day onward, the corner became a regular fixture in my routine. Each morning, as I arrived at work, I would make a detour to stand in the corner for a moment, seeking that elusive sound, hoping to catch a glimpse of its secrets. My colleagues noticed, of course, casting curious glances as they walked by. Some joked about my peculiar habit, while others avoided me altogether, sensing the growing strangeness. But I cared little for their opinions. The corner held a sway over me that I could neither understand nor resist. With each visit, the intensity of the experience grew. The murmur, once faint, became clearer, forming into distinct words. They were fragmented and disjointed, like a radio signal struggling through static. Yet each time I stood there, I caught more of their meaning. The words were cryptic, haunting in their ambiguity. They spoke of longing and sorrow, of secrets buried deep beneath the veneer of the everyday world. I began to dream of the corner, a recurring dream where I stood surrounded by darkness, the voice speaking to me in urgent, hushed tones. It called my name, beckoning me to listen, to understand. Each morning I would wake with the echoes of its message resounding in my ears, the dream slipping away like smoke, leaving only the feeling of something important, something vital, just beyond my grasp. Outside of work, my life began to unravel. I found it increasingly difficult to focus on anything but the corner. My apartment, once a refuge from the world, became little more than a place to sleep. Friends grew concerned, and my family, upon hearing of my obsession, urged me to seek help, but I shrugged off their worries. They couldn't understand. No one could. The escalation of events came swiftly, like an unexpected storm. It began one night, after a particularly long day at the office. I was alone, the building silent except for the distant hum of the city beyond. As I stood in the corner, the voice emerged, clearer than ever before. It spoke my name in a soft, insistent tone, then fell silent. I stood there, breathless, waiting for more, but only silence followed. It was then that I noticed it, a shadow darker than any shadow should be, pooling at my feet. It shifted and writhed, a living thing, though there was no light to cast it. I stepped back, heart racing, but the shadow clung to me, stretching as though to follow. Panic surged through me, and I fled the building, the weight of that shadow trailing behind like a phantom. At home, my sanctuary offered no comfort. The shadow had followed, lurking at the edges of my vision, a constant reminder of the corner's influence. I could sense it watching, its presence a tangible force that pressed against my mind. Sleep eluded me as the hours crept by, each tick of the clock amplifying the silence in which the voice had once spoken. By day, I carried the shadow with me. It became a part of my world, a sinister companion that shadowed my every move. In meetings, during phone calls, even in the simplest of tasks, it was there, a constant reminder of the corner's secrets, whispering to me in a language only I could understand. I tried to ignore it, to pretend that life could continue unchanged, but the shadow's grip grew stronger. It was as if the corner was consuming me, piece by piece, erasing the boundary between reality and the world it inhabited. The voice, too, grew bolder, speaking not just in the corner, but in the quiet moments when the noise of the world faded away. It told me things, secrets of the building, of its past, of the people who had once worked there and never really left. The climax of my ordeal came unexpectedly, on a day that seemed no different from any other. The sun was a distant glow behind the clouds, and the office hummed with the usual activity. I could feel the shadow more keenly than ever, its presence a weight upon my soul. Desperate for release, I returned to the corner, seeking answers. As I stood there, the shadow enveloped me, wrapping me in its cold embrace. The voice rose to a crescendo, a maddening cacophony of words and emotions. It spoke of despair, of hope, of secrets hidden within the walls, urging me to see, to understand. My mind reeled, caught in a maelstrom of sensation and sound. Then, in a moment of clarity, I understood. The corner was a threshold, a gateway between worlds, a place where the veil between the present and the past was thin. It was a place of memories, of echoes, of those who had come before, leaving their mark upon the fabric of time. And in that moment of realization, the voice fell silent, the shadow receding into the depths of the corner, leaving me standing alone, trembling and breathless. The experience left me changed, marked in ways I could never fully articulate. The corner, once a place of obsession, became a place of reverence. I understood now that it was not a place of evil, but of memory, a repository of the past, of emotions and experiences that lingered long after the people who had lived them had gone. I no longer felt the compulsion to stand in the corner, to listen to the voice or follow the shadow, but its presence remained with me, a silent spectator to the life I continued to lead. And yet, the fear lingered. The knowledge that the corner held secrets beyond my understanding never left me. I often found myself wondering about the stories it contained, about the lives it had touched. I could feel its influence in the quiet moments, in the whisper of the wind outside my window, in the creak of the floorboards late at night. It was a reminder that the world was not as mundane as it seemed, that beneath the surface of the everyday lay a tapestry of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. In the end, the corner remained a part of my life, a constant presence at the edges of my awareness. It taught me to look beyond the ordinary, to listen to the silences between words, to see the shadows in the light. And though the fear never fully dissipated, it became a part of me, a thread woven into the fabric of my existence, a testament to the strange and wondrous things that lay just beyond the edges of perception. In the beginning, life was tediously predictable, as it often is in the world of office buildings and daily commutes. My workspace consisted of a small cubicle nestled in the corner of the ninth floor of a nondescript commercial high-rise. The building, with its bland beige facade and identical symmetrical windows, held nothing remarkable. It was the kind of place where dreams went to wither under the humdrum glow of fluorescent lights. The days were marked by the rhythmic clacking of keyboards, low murmur of conversations, and the occasional laughter from a coworker sharing a joke by the water cooler. It was all too ordinary, and in some ways, comfortingly so. I had settled into a routine that many would find so crushingly monotonous, but for me, it was a refuge. Each morning, I would ride the elevator up, greeting those I barely knew with a nod or a polite smile, before sinking into the familiarity of my chair. The days drifted by without much consequence, marked by calendars filled with meetings and deadlines that seemed to stretch into infinity. In that hive of activity, my corner was my sanctuary, away from prying eyes, a space where I could exist unnoticed. The building had a peculiar legend among the staff. They called it the Distress Corner, a small alcove where the hallways intersected on the ninth floor, not far from my cubicle. It was said to be a place where one could feel a creeping unease, a subtle disquiet that seeped into the bones. Some laughed it off as the product of overactive imaginations, a ghost story to tell new employees. Others swore they felt something there, an unseen presence that gnawed at the edges of reality. I never paid much heed to these tales. I was a man of logic, of numbers and spreadsheets, not given to flights of fancy. It was the kind of story that one might mention to break the monotony of a long meeting or to add a frisson of thrill to an otherwise dull job. So, it was with a kind of detached amusement that I approached the Distress Corner one afternoon, a coffee cup in hand, on my way back from the break room. As I passed the corner, I felt it. not in the way one feels a breeze or hears a distant sound, but in an intangible shift within myself, a sensation barely perceptible, yet undeniably there. It was as if, for a fleeting moment, the air thickened, pressing down upon me, making my steps heavy and my breath shallow. I paused, shaking my head to dismiss the bizarre sensation. It was probably just fatigue, I told myself, or perhaps a symptom of too much caffeine and too little sleep. But the feeling lingered, clinging to me like a shadow that refused to be shaken off. I returned to my cubicle, trying to lose myself in the routine tasks of the day. Yet, my mind kept drifting back to that corner, to the oppressive weight I had felt there. It was a subtle intrusion, like a splinter in the mind, small but persistent. Days passed, each one blending into the next, yet I found myself drawn to that corner repeatedly. Each time, the sensation grew stronger, a sinister whisper just out of earshot, a chill that seemed to emanate from within the walls themselves. Others in the office began to notice my frequent trips there, facetiously dubbing me the corner keeper. I laughed it off, but inside, I felt an unsettling connection to the space. The first true disturbance happened on a particularly dreary Tuesday. I had stayed late, the office deserted save for the cleaning staff. The flickering glow of the computer screens cast a pale light over the empty desks. I was preparing to leave when I realized I had forgotten my phone at the corner during one of my inexplicable visits. As I approached the distressed corner, the air felt charged with an unfamiliar energy, a pulsing that seemed to sync with my racing heartbeat. I found my phone, but as I picked it up, a sharp pang of anxiety shot through me, so intense that I staggered backward. In that moment, I swore I heard a sound, a low, mournful wail that sent shivers crawling up my spine. I stood frozen, straining to hear more, but all that followed was silence, profound and impenetrable. Back at home in my modest apartment, I tried to shake off the experience. I told myself it was just the stress of work and too much time spent alone at night. Yet, sleep eluded me, my mind replaying the incident in a continuous loop. The sound, so out of place in the sterile confines of the office, haunted me, a relentless echo in the quiet of my bedroom. The days that followed were marked by an escalating unease. I became increasingly distracted, my work suffering as my mind dwelled on the distressed corner. I avoided it at first, trying to distance myself from the irrational pull it exerted on me. But the more I resisted, the stronger the compulsion grew, until it became a consuming obsession. Colleagues began to notice the change in me. Where once I had been a stable, if unremarkable, presence, I now carried an air of distracted anxiety. Casual conversations became burdensome, and I avoided eye contact, fearing what others might see in my eyes. The office, once a place of routine comfort, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows and whispers, with the distressed corner its ominous heart. The climax of this horrific ordeal came on a night much like that unsettling Tuesday. I had again stayed late, the office deserted. My intent was to avoid the corner, to leave it behind and focus on the tasks at hand. But a call of duty, or perhaps fate, drew me there once more. This time, the atmosphere was different, darker, more oppressive than ever before. As I stood in the distressed corner, a cold seeped into my skin, deeper than any physical chill. The walls seemed to close in, the space shrinking around me. Panic rose in my chest, and I backed away, tripping over something unseen, falling to the floor. As I lay there, I heard it again, the mournful wail, but this time it was accompanied by a presence, a palpable force that pressed down upon me, as if the very air had weight and intention. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, fear driving me from the building. Outside, the night air was sharp and bracing, a stark contrast to the suffocating heaviness of the office. I drove home, hands trembling on the wheel, mind racing with the implications of what I had experienced. The presence I had felt was no figment of imagination. It was real as the ground beneath my feet. At home, the walls seemed to close in, mirroring the oppressive atmosphere of the office. I tried to rationalize, to convince myself that it was all in my head, a psychological response to stress and isolation. But the lingering fear was inescapable, a shadow that followed me into every room. every moment of silence. Sleep provided no relief. My dreams were haunted by the corner, its mournful wail echoing in the recesses of my mind. I awoke each morning exhausted, the boundary between dream and reality blurred. The fear was ever present, a constant companion, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. In the days that followed, I sought answers, delving into the history of the building with a fervor that bordered on mania. I pored over old records, articles, anything that might hint at the origin of the distress corner. What I found was a tapestry of loss and sorrow, tales of those who had worked in the building and had inexplicably vanished, their fates unknown. The realization struck me with the force of a tidal wave. The corner was a nexus of despair, a vortex that drew in the vulnerable, feeding off their fears until nothing remained. The presence I had felt was the accumulation of their anguish, a sentient echo of pain and longing that lingered in the air. With this understanding came a grim resolution. I could not continue as I was, trapped in a cycle of terror and obsession. I devised a plan, a means to confront the fear head on, to face the distress corner and whatever haunted it. I would reclaim my life, or I would become another of its victims. The final confrontation was both terrifying and liberating. I stood in the corner, my heart pounding with both fear and determination. The oppressive atmosphere descended, the weight of the presence pressing down upon me. But this time, I did not flee. I stood my ground, facing the invisible entity with a resolve born of desperation. In that moment, I felt a shift, a lessening of the oppressive weight, as if my defiance had weakened its hold. The presence withdrew, leaving me standing alone in the dimly lit alcove, the air clear and still. I had faced the fear, and in doing so, I had broken its power over me. In the weeks that followed, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. The office remained unchanged in its mundane routine, and the distress corner lost its grip on my mind. Yet, the memories lingered, a reminder of the delicate balance between reality and the unseen horrors that lurk in the shadows. I moved apartments shortly after, seeking a fresh start free from the echoes of that dark experience. But even in my new surroundings, the lingering fear remained, a subtle undercurrent to my life. I often wondered what I had truly encountered, whether it was a psychological manifestation or something far more sinister. And though I had reclaimed my sense of self, I knew that the distress corner still existed, waiting in the shadows of the ninth floor, a silent guardian of the unseen. It was a place of secrets and sorrow, a catalyst for terror that lay dormant until called upon by those unsuspecting souls who ventured too close. In the quiet moments of reflection, I would remember its pull, a reminder of the thin veil separating the ordinary from the extraordinary. Even now, I tread carefully through the corridors of life, aware of the unseen forces that lie just beyond the surface, waiting to whisper their tales into the ears of those willing to listen. The fear remains, an echo of a past confrontation, but it is tempered by a knowledge that I had faced the darkness and emerged whole. And in the end, perhaps that is the truest victory of all. The city never sleeps, they say, but neither do the invisible mechanisms that haunt the spaces between our waking hours. My apartment, a modest one-bedroom on the 11th floor of a nondescript high-rise, was my sanctuary from the world. It was where I found peace after long days spent behind the sterile, fluorescent-lit screens of my office. My work was unremarkable, a standard 9 to 5 in a corporate labyrinth where I processed data and generated reports, tasks that required little more than mechanical focus. Yet, it was in these mundane routines that I first noticed the subtle shifts, the creeping oddity that would unravel the fabric of my seemingly ordinary life. It began with the corner. In the southwest section of the open plan office, there was a peculiar spot that everyone referred to as the distress corner. It was an inside joke, a whispered legend among us office drones, attributed to nothing more sinister than a particularly uncomfortable draft and an awkward layout that left it isolated from the natural flow of the workspace. Despite the jokes, no one lingered there longer than necessary. It was just a corner, after all, or so I thought. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I found myself drawn to the distress corner. My desk, located conveniently near the windows, was flooded with an unusual brightness as the rain-laden clouds filtered the city lights into a surreal glow. On that day, our server had crashed, leaving everyone with little to do but wait, an unexpected reprieve from our monotonous tasks. With nothing to tether me to my usual spot, I wandered. When I reached the distressed corner, I paused, curious. The sensation hit me first. A subtle yet undeniable pressure settled on my chest, as though the corner itself exhaled a weary sigh into my bones. I felt a peculiar tingling in my fingertips, and my breath caught in my throat. I shook it off, attributing it to the draft and the bizarre stories that circulated about the place. But over the following days, the corner seemed to beckon. Strangely, I'd find myself staring at it during meetings, my eyes drawn to the quiet, unassuming space in a way that made no logical sense. The pressure I felt grew, morphing into a persistent whisper at the edge of my consciousness. The first disturbance came soon after. My dreams, once a tapestry of fragmented thoughts and images, became vivid and unsettling. Each night, I found myself standing in that corner, the office eerily empty, the lights dimmed to a ghostly hue. The murmurs of my colleagues, distant and distorted, filled my mind, though their words were always just beyond comprehension. I awoke each morning with a sense of unease that clung to my skin. It wasn't until the dream slipped into my waking life that I began to truly worry. My reflections in the mirrors seemed subtly wrong, my eyes darker, shadows lingering beneath them as if they were windows to a different, more tumultuous soul. Disturbing thoughts punctuated my days, intrusive and relentless. At first, I dismissed them as stress-induced, the natural byproduct of long hours and little rest. But deep down, the truth gnawed at me. The corner was changing me. The escalation was gradual yet relentless, like the slow, persistent pull of a tide. I began to notice the corner when I wasn't even looking at it, a phantom presence that loomed at the periphery of my vision. The dreams intensified, darkening into episodes that left me breathless and drenched in sweat. In them, the office morphed into a nightmarish maze, walls closing in, shadows stretching into grotesque shapes that whispered my name in malevolent tones. At work, I became increasingly isolated, the corner's influence casting a pall over my interactions. Colleagues, once amiable, now seemed distant, their faces blurring into indistinct forms. I could sense their discomfort, as if they, too, felt the corner's reach through me. Conversations faltered, and whispers accompanied my passage through the hallways. One evening, as I prepared to leave the office, I found myself inexplicably drawn to the corner once more. The office was deserted, the usual buzz of activity replaced by a disquieting silence. I stood there, heart pounding, as the walls seemed to close in, the shadows deepening until they engulfed me completely. In that moment, something shifted. The corner peeled back the veneer of my reality, revealing the truths I had refused to acknowledge. My life, once painted in shades of comforting familiarity, now stood stark and bare. The corner had become a mirror, reflecting not only my fears, but the emptiness that lay at the heart of my existence. I stumbled back, breaking free from the corner's hold, but it was too late. The world around me warped, my perception twisting into a surreal dance of light and shadow. I fled to my apartment, seeking solace in its familiar confines, but the corner's influence had followed me home. My sanctuary now felt foreign, tainted. The climax arrived one night, a crescendo of terror that shattered the fragile boundaries of my sanity. I awoke to find myself standing in the corner of my bedroom, staring at the reflection in my wardrobe mirror. The figure staring back was not me, but a twisted, malevolent version of myself. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, its smile a grotesque mimicry of my own. In that instant, I understood the corner's purpose. It was a window, a portal to the darkest recesses of my mind. It had drawn out my fears, my insecurities, and now wore them like a second skin. I screamed, the sound echoing through the stillness of the night, but no one came. The city slept, oblivious to the horrors that unfolded behind closed doors. Somehow, I found the strength to turn away, to retreat from the sinister specter that mirrored me. I collapsed onto my bed, shivering as I tried to expel the vision from my mind. Sleep eluded me, but I knew it was futile to resist. The corner had marked me, and I was forever changed. The lingering fear remains, an indelible stain on the fabric of my existence. Each day is a battle against the whispers that echo in my mind, the shadows that creep at the edges of my vision. I avoid the office whenever possible, working from home under the guise of flexibility, but the corner's presence lingers, ever watchful. In my apartment, I have rearranged the furniture, attempting to dispel the specter of the corner, but it is a futile effort. The mornings bring a fleeting sense of normalcy, but as night falls, the familiar dread returns, swelling like a dark tide. I have learned to live with the fear, to accept it as part of my reality. The corner may no longer be a physical space, but it exists within me, a constant reminder of the darkness that hides beneath the surface of the mundane. I write this account not seeking understanding nor comfort, but as a testament to the quiet horrors that lurk in the places we least expect. And perhaps, somewhere out there, another soul will read these words and recognize the truth. The corners of our minds are vast and unknowable, haunted by shadows that take the shape of our deepest fears. We cannot escape them, only learn to coexist with them in the flickering light of our own fragile reality. I always found solace in routine. The rhythmic predictability of my daily life provided a comfort, a gentle cocoon from the unpredictable chaos of the world outside. My work at the laboratory facility was methodical, a series of carefully calibrated experiments that required utmost precision. But it wasn't the sterile white walls of the lab that offered me the most peace. It was the small cafeteria tucked away in the corner of the building. Every day at noon, I'd retreat to that sanctuary, a tray laden with the day's selection on my table. The cafeteria was a haven of ordinary sounds, the clatter of cutlery, the soft hum of the vending machines, the muted chatter of colleagues exchanging pleasantries. I cherished these sounds, the mundane fabric of my existence. The food was simple but satisfying, an array of sandwiches, soups, and salads that rotated weekly. I favored the grilled cheese sandwich, its comforting warmth a tangible reminder of home. The cafeteria staff, a jovial group led by a kindly woman named Mrs. Jenkins, always greeted me with a smile. Her voice was lilting, the cadence of her words wrapping around me like a warm shawl. It was on a Thursday when the first disturbance crept into my sanctuary. The cafeteria was bustling, filled with the usual crowd, yet something felt off. As I settled into my usual spot by the window, I noticed a faint, acrid scent lingering in the air. It was barely noticeable, like the whisper of a forgotten memory, but it nestled in the back of my mind, refusing to dissipate. Mrs. Jenkins approached, offering the day's special, a bowl of creamy tomato bisque. I accepted it with a nod, trying to shake off the odd sense of unease. The soup was rich, the tang of tomato perfectly balanced with the cream, but that strange odor persisted. It mingled with the aroma of the food, creating an unsettling discord. As the days wore on, the scent grew stronger, more pronounced. It began to cling to everything, embedding itself in the very air we breathed. My colleagues commented on it, their conversations drifting over tables like leaves on a breeze. Some speculated it was the result of a nearby construction project. Others suggested it was a plumbing issue, but I knew, deep down, that it was something else entirely. The escalation was subtle, like a shadow lengthening as the sun dips lower in the sky. More and more, my coworkers began to complain of stomach aches, mild at first, but increasing in severity. The cafeteria became quieter, the usual chatter replaced by a muted tension that weighed heavily in the air. I tried to ignore the gnawing dread that settled in my stomach, an insidious presence that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. My appetite dwindled, the food losing its appeal, replaced by an inexplicable aversion. Even the grilled cheese sandwiches, once a beloved staple, now tasted stale and unappetizing. Mrs. Jenkins remained cheerful, her demeanor unchanged despite the growing unrest. She assured us that everything was fine, that the food was safe. Yet, her reassurances only added to my unease, an eerie dissonance between her words and the reality that surrounded us. One afternoon, as I sat alone in the cafeteria, I noticed something strange. The light streaming through the windows seemed different, casting the room in an odd, yellowish hue. It was as if the very air had taken on a corporeal form, dense and oppressive. I glanced around, noting the absence of my usual companions. The room was eerily silent, the only sound the soft hum of the vending machines. It was then that I realized I was the only one left. Panic clutched at my chest, a cold, skeletal hand that squeezed tighter with each breath. I stumbled to my feet, the chair clattering to the floor behind me. As I made my way to the door, I felt a chill ripple through the room, a sudden drop in temperature that raised goosebumps on my arms. I paused, casting one last glance at the cafeteria. In that moment, I saw it, a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision, a shadow darting across the floor. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but undeniably real. A primal fear surged through me, and I fled, the echo of my footsteps ringing in my ears. The cafeteria was closed the next day, a sign posted on the door citing maintenance issues. Rumors swirled among the staff, tales of a contamination, a mysterious illness sweeping through the facility. Yet, no official explanation was given, only silence from those in charge. I found myself avoiding the area, the memory of that shadow lingering in the corners of my mind. My dreams were filled with dark figures, faceless and formless, whispering secrets I couldn't comprehend. Weeks passed, and the fear lingered, a constant companion that clung to me like a second skin. The cafeteria reopened, but I couldn't bring myself to return. The once comforting space had become a place of dread, a reminder of the unseen terror that hid beneath the ordinary veneer of my life. In the end, it wasn't the physical presence of a monster that haunted me, but the insidious nature of fear itself. The knowledge that something as simple as a meal, a place of comfort, could transform into a source of horror. The cafeteria, with its lingering shadows and unsettling scents, had become a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that even the most mundane aspects of life can harbor darkness. And so, I carry the fear with me, a silent reminder of the unseen horrors that lurk in the shadows, waiting to consume the unwary. In the depths of night, when the world is quiet and shadows stretch long, I find myself listening for that whisper of danger, the echo of a presence just beyond perception. For in the end, it is not the seen that terrifies us most, but the unseen, the shapeless void that resides just beyond the edges of our understanding. And in that darkness, we are left to wonder what truly lies in wait, biding its time, watching, always hungry. The cafeteria at our laboratory facility had always been what you might call unremarkable. It was a place of routine where the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, bathing the linoleum floors in an indifferent white glow. Rows of identical tables stretched in orderly lines, their surfaces smooth and unyielding. The hum of conversation was a constant backdrop, a low, comforting murmur that folded around us as we went about our daily rituals. Some days, I would sit near the window where the glass was perpetually fogged from the breath of warmth against the chill outside, and watch the world blur past in muted shades of gray and green. The food was, in the most charitable terms, functional. It filled a void, neither offending nor delighting, simply existing as fuel to propel us through the rest of our day. The coffee was a lifeline, bitter and scalding, served in chipped mugs that bore the scars of countless dishwasher cycles. We drank it because we needed to, because it was what we did, like clockwork, every morning and afternoon. Routine was the unspoken law of the cafeteria, and it offered solace in its predictability. The faces were familiar, the voices recognizable, even if names eluded me. I was content in this rhythm, not questioning, never wanting for more. It was, after all, just a cafeteria, a simple, unassuming space within the sprawling complexity of the laboratory facility. It began on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. The cafeteria had filled with its usual patrons, and I found myself at my customary table, cradling a mug of coffee between my palms. The warmth seeped into my skin, grounding me in the moment as I scanned the room with a sense of detached calm. My colleagues moved around me, collecting their trays, the clatter of cutlery mingling with the low drone of conversation. I noticed something then, a subtle shift in the air. the kind of intangible disturbance that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand to attention. It was not immediately obvious, not something you could pinpoint, but it was there, hovering just at the edge of perception. The noise of the room fell away, leaving a peculiar, echoing silence that seemed to press in on me from all sides. As I looked around, I realized it wasn't just my imagination. Others had felt it too. Conversations faltered, voices hushed to cautious whispers as people cast uncertain glances toward one another. It was as if we were collectively holding our breath, waiting for something we couldn't quite name. Then there was the food. Today's menu was no different from any other day, yet there was something off about it. I couldn't put my finger on what it was exactly, but as I picked up my fork, a creeping unease slithered through my gut. The roast beef looked unusually dark, its edges almost blackened, and the mashed potatoes seemed to quiver slightly, an unsettling mimicry of life. It was then that I noticed the chef, a man I had never really paid much attention to, standing behind the serving counter. He was a fixture in the cafeteria, a silent guardian of our daily sustenance. Today, however, there was something about him that drew my gaze. His posture was stiff, his eyes fixed on the diners with an intensity that bordered on unsettling. His hands moved mechanically, almost robotically, as he served each portion with an unwavering precision. I tried to shake it off, attributing my discomfort to a sleepless night or perhaps an overactive imagination. But as the day wore on, the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing hour. By lunchtime, it was a full-fledged discomfort that gnawed at the edges of my mind. I noticed others hesitating over their meals, forks hovering in midair as they exchanged uncertain looks. The cafeteria's atmosphere had shifted. The once comforting hum of conversation was now punctuated by awkward silences and nervous laughter. I found myself watching the chef more closely, noting the way he seemed to hover just a little too long over each dish, as if considering something that eluded the rest of us. That evening, as I lay in bed, the sense of unease followed me into my dreams. They were vivid, unsettling visions of the cafeteria transformed into a place of shadows and whispers, where the food writhed and shifted on the plates, refusing to be tamed. I awoke with a start, the sheets tangled around me, heart racing in the dark. The next morning, the tension in the cafeteria was palpable. People moved with a nervous energy, their voices pitched low. The food looked the same as ever, yet there was an undercurrent of something menacing in its presentation. The chef, ever watchful, seemed to study us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I opted for a simple salad, picking at the greens with a kind of wariness I couldn't quite explain. It was as if the food had become a living thing, imbued with a will of its own, a malevolent intent lurking beneath its benign exterior. As I ate, I was aware of eyes watching me, a prickling sensation that danced along my spine. The unease grew into something more insidious as the week progressed. People whispered of strange occurrences, of food that seemed to move on its own, meals that left a bitter taste in their mouths long after the last bite. Some claimed to have seen shadows flitting at the edges of their vision, darting away when confronted. A trick of the light, they told themselves, yet the fear lingered. Rumors spread like wildfire, each story more outlandish than the last. Someone claimed to have bitten into a sandwich only to find it filled with something unrecognizable, a pulsing mass that had slithered away before they could comprehend it. Another spoke of a soup that rippled like a living thing, sentient and aware. The cafeteria had become a place of dread, a shadowy realm where we treaded lightly, wary of what lay beneath the surface of our meals. The chef remained a constant presence, his eyes following us with a calculated intensity that spoke of secrets unshared. We avoided his gaze, pretending to chat about mundane things while our minds were consumed by the growing horror we could not articulate. Despite the fear, the need for normalcy kept us returning to our usual spots, clinging to the routine as if it might anchor us in sanity. Yet, each meal was an ordeal, a battle against the rising tide of dread that threatened to overwhelm us. We ate in silence, our eyes darting to one another in shared understanding. It came to a head one afternoon when a colleague, Mark, let out a strangled cry, his fork clattering to the floor. We turned to see him staring at his plate, a look of pure terror etched into his features. The room fell silent, all eyes on Mark as he pushed back from the table, his chair scraping the floor with a screech that cut through the air. "It's alive," he whispered, voice shaking. "The food, it's alive." A ripple of panic swept through the room, a kind of controlled chaos as people scrambled away from their plates, faces pale and drawn. I felt a chill seep into my bones, a deep-seated fear that took root in my mind, whispering of things best left unspoken. The chef stood motionless behind the counter, an enigmatic figure amid the turmoil. His expression was inscrutable, a mask that betrayed nothing of the thoughts behind his eyes. For a moment, our gazes locked, and in that instant, I sensed a profound, unsettling understanding pass between us. In the days that followed, the cafeteria was deserted, its sterile surfaces echoing with the absence of life. We avoided it like the plague, choosing instead to eat at our desks or in small, scattered groups elsewhere. The fear lingered, a dark specter that haunted our every moment, casting long shadows over our work and our lives. No official explanation was ever given, and the chef remained a silent sentinel, his presence a constant reminder of the horrors we dared not speak of. We carried on, pretending that the cafeteria had never existed, that its unseen terror was nothing more than a bad dream. But the fear persists, a lingering chill that clings to the edges of my consciousness. Even now, I find myself eyeing my meals with suspicion, half expecting them to leap to life, to reveal the secrets they conceal. It's a madness I cannot shake, a dread that burrows deep into the psyche, transforming the mundane into the monstrous. I am left with the unsettling knowledge that some horrors are unseen, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to consume us. We surround ourselves with the comfort of routine, but in the quiet moments, the fear creeps in, reminding us of the fragility of our perceived safety. The cafeteria, with its rows of tables and buzzing lights, remains a ghostly memory, a place where the boundaries of reality and nightmare blur. Perhaps it was always more than it seemed, a crucible of fears made manifest, a reminder of the darkness that dwells within us all. As I sit here, pen in hand, I am forced to confront the terrifying possibility that we are never truly safe, that the things we take for granted may hide the very horrors we fear. The cafeteria is gone, but its shadow looms large, a testament to the unseen terrors that haunt our waking lives. And so I write, seeking solace in the act of putting pen to paper, hoping to exorcise the demons that linger just out of sight. Yet, even as I do, I feel their presence, a cold breath at my neck, a whisper in the silence, a reminder that some fears are never truly vanquished, only held at bay until the next disturbance shakes us from our complacency.